Good morning. Welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid, and I'm Brigid Burke. Another beautiful day today here in New Jersey, where I live. And today is a rather interesting day for me in the context of the stuff I've been talking about in the last week. I mean, the power outages notwithstanding. There's been some interesting things that have been going on. I do live streams here, and I also do live streams over on the Katonia podcast channel. Now, I did a live stream there yesterday, which I felt was, sometimes with a lot of the ones that I do here too, I'll start to talk about things and I feel kind of weird talking about them because I'm not entirely sure sometimes, especially when it comes to the Azrael channelings, when it comes to the kind of messages that I get that are more, the angelic messages that are a little more cryptic. Sometimes I'm like, okay, this is the message I'm getting. Hi, I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe it has to do with this. It sounds like it has to do with that. So there's a lot of that energy around, sometimes I go on there and I wonder what people who are watching it are thinking. I'm like yesterday's especially, I had done a live stream over on the Katonia podcast channel where I was talking about Saturn retrograde. And I was also talking a bit about ideas of Saturn. Saturn is alchemical. Saturn as what they call the black sun, the one that is bringing about a dissolution. And so what I'm going to end up talking about in today's live stream is that all of a sudden, something happened yesterday, not to me personally, okay? Remember, I've also been talking a lot in these live streams about how about field theory, about we don't exist in a vacuum. I can't just say, oh, I'm talking about this thing, and this thing just applies to Brigid and to nobody else. So we've talked about the influence of Saturn, okay, and we've talked about the influence of Uranus, especially those of you who are in Taurus, like myself. Uranus likes to come in and mess things up. Now, I did a reading. I haven't posted the readings yet for Liminal Tarot. I will get those finished and up by today. I did some of them yesterday. I didn't get to finish them because I ended up with a headache in the evening, so I didn't finish them. But I am going to finish and have everything posted by the end of today. The Taurus reading that I did, what left me a little unsettled, because it was basically, I had Seth in the 9th house, which is the Sagittarius house. And everything else basically looked fine, but that was just one where it was there was going to be, I saw it with the Lotus card, so it's okay, there's going to be some kind of anxiety here. And when I pulled, what I did was for my extra, how people who watch my readings know that I will do the cartouche card pull, then I will do the a tarot pull to clarify, and then I will use some other oracle at the end. I will just pull a card or something. Sometimes more than one card will flip out, but generally, I'll just do something like that. So I used the Norse runes because I had my bag of runes, and I was like, okay, we'll do a rune. And the rune I got under Taurus was Hagalaz. Okay, and Hagalaz, of course, is it's like a tower moment. It's disruption. And as I mentioned, when I've been pulling my Enochian cards, okay, so when I've been pulling, trying to communicate that way, and again, I still have to create more of them. I have a lot of nouns, but not a whole lot of verbs. The messages I keep getting from the angels are something about, or from Azrael in particular, when I use that method of communicating with him, is kind of there's something, was talking about, there's going to be a harvest, and there's going to be a truth that's revealed. There's going to be and something about, she's going to come in with her fury. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It was again, clearly they know something that I don't. All right, and I don't even know how to translate that for people. But I was just really baffled, and then I had gotten things about Lilith, Babylon. These are all these energies, these kind of dark mother energies that come in. And again, if you follow me on Katonia, you know that really what these are energies that are connected to our sovereignty. They have to do with rebellion. They have to do with freedom. They have to do with the particularly feminine freedom. But also, if we think about the feminine as something that has happened in our culture, as something that is, for lack of a better word, we're going to say subverted. It's something everything that we do is the masculine is privileged, okay? Our rationality is privileged. Scientific method is privileged. I mean, these are all very masculine things. And so even people, and of course, yeah, there's still this idea of, women, their status socially and their status economically, and the battles that women have, say, to get equal pay and things like that. I mean, there's this things going on a number of levels, and then there's a lot going on right now around what was considered to be normal behavior for many years towards women. And also the fact that we're seeing a lot of the eroding of rights over things like bodily autonomy and stuff in the United States. So there's been, so there's a lot of concern about that, just about women. But even if we go beyond women, if we just talk about the feminine with a capital F as it applies to people regardless of gender or biological sex or anything like that, there's a disenfranchisement, as we've talked about over and over again, of intuition. There's a disenfranchisement of emotions. There's a disenfranchisement of things that are learned instinctively rather than things that you reasoned out. And so, in short, a lot of this, plus the devaluation that we have of the earth, which is the reason I don't like words like, or phrases like ascension, because to me, this is like, we're going to rise to the celestial realm, which is higher and better than this one. There's a disenfranchisement of the feminine. That's literally my whole shtick, and it's not a joke. I mean, it's just like, yeah, there's a disenfranchisement there, and that's something we have to address, because, that disenfranchisement, when you disown something, it wreaks havoc. And so that's why when I'm seeing this kind of a thing, I'm like, okay, what does this mean? Okay, so good morning, Melissa. I'm just talking about some of the messages that I've been getting recently. I'm talking about the live stream I did yesterday on Katonia podcast, which I don't know if you saw. And yesterday, of course, yesterday's topic for the live stream was epiphanies, right? It was aha moments. And so I woke up this morning with an aha moment, and in light of some things that had happened yesterday. Good morning, Sudha. So I was just talking about how, yesterday's aha moments, I woke up this morning with one. So, okay. So yesterday's podcast over on Katonia, well, it wasn't the podcast, it's Katonia Podcast, one word, that's my other Instagram handle. I talked a little bit about Saturn, the influence of Saturn, because I was talking about how it's Saturn retrograde, and then I'm also talking about the other thing that's happening is Neptune is going retrograde. Okay. Now, Neptune retrograde, I mean, there's a lot of things that could come with it, but Neptune tends to keep things kind of nebulous and hazy. So when Neptune goes retrograde, this is an opportunity for clarity, okay? This is where we're looking at something. This is where we're challenged. We were revisiting territory and things like that. And one of the things I was talking about with Saturn, and I did get questions about, privately, kind of about what is Saturn retrograde? What does that really mean? What does that mean? What does that mean in my life? What does it mean in your life? The thing is, you have to remember with planets like Saturn and Neptune that they are far out. The planets that have the most impact on us directly in terms of our day-to-day lives are usually, like Mercury, Venus, Mars, Moon, because they're right around us. They're close to us. Even Jupiter to some degree. When you're talking about the outer planets, they're not as close to us, so it's not that they don't or can't affect our personal lives. But oftentimes, their movement implies something that's more collective rather than individual, okay? Again, it can affect you individually. I'm not saying it doesn't, and of course, its position in your chart is going to say something about certain aspects of your life, maybe what you do. Like if you have Neptune in the 6th house, which is I think where mine is, then you may have more of a inclination towards, say, healing work or dealing more in psychical realms or things like that. Like that might be part of what your service is to the world. Okay, if you have Neptune in the 6th house, for example. Similarly with the 10th house, you may, like I said, depending on where it shows up. Where Saturn shows up makes a difference. A lot of that has to do with maybe, the span of your soul, what goes on across multiple dimensions or whatever. And good morning, Sam. So we're talking about that. Saturn retrograde, Neptune retrograde. And the fact that now it's like kind of like truths are coming up. And as I was mentioning, when I use the Enochian cards to talk with Archangel Azrael, which is another method. I mean, I do the channelings, but sometimes I will sit down and talk that way because that's just, whenever I ask about like what cards to use, those are the ones he wants. Even though it's not really a complete set. It's like I said, as I've said before, it's almost like talking to somebody when you have a phrase book and you're trying to communicate with, trying to explain what something is. And so we're kind of communicating. I mean, he can communicate in English, but he does like to use those. It feels like that. Maybe there's more of a connection there. So, and like I said, he keeps talking about not only a truth that's coming up, a harvest that's coming up, and something about the fury of the feminine. And I'm like, what is that about? What does that mean? And yesterday, as I did the live stream yesterday over on Katonia at noon EST. And, and when I was done with it, I'm like, I don't even know what am I talking about? Why am I bringing this up? And why am I saying the dark feminine has something to do with this? Because it's a message that's coming through, but it's not something that made sense to me. And as I said, yesterday I was talking about epiphanies or aha moments. So the aha moment that I had came when I found out yesterday afternoon. Now, you may think this is just America specific. So we're talking about things that are, as I said, Neptune, Saturn, they tend to be about bigger issues, not just us. And Uranus too, to be honest. It has to do with social upheaval. And I've talked about that. We're seeing all this stuff where we're saying, okay, and freedom, okay? And the way in which freedom and sovereignty is something that, do you want it and do you want to take the responsibility that goes with it, right? We've talked, that card has shown up a lot in the last few weeks. And so probably if you're in America, you're aware that the Supreme Court made a decision yesterday that presidents have a pretty sweeping amount of prosecutorial immunity. And a lot of people were, now initially it was interesting, like if I don't have TV, so I only see what shows up on YouTube, like, kind of the sound bites and things. And I noticed MSNBC was sort of characterizing it as, oh, the court determines that that Trump has some immunity, or that he's not immune from everything. That's not a good way to spin it, because that decision is really, really bad. I don't know if people understand the gravity of that decision, and it's not just about Trump, it's not just about his cases. It's bad no matter who's in office, okay? It doesn't matter whether it's him, doesn't matter whether it's Joe Biden, it doesn't matter. It's not a good decision, because basically it says the president cannot be prosecuted for anything that he does, if it's considered an official act. And the definition of official act is really, really broad. And the lawyers sometimes check in on who are federal prosecutors, or people who are, work for the ACLU, or let's say Mark from Democracy Docket. Like, you look at all these people and they're like, this is so bad. And the thing is, you can't appeal it because it's the Supreme Court. Like, there's no place for it to go. Now, sure, down the road, if you have a change in justices, or if there's an adjustment in the court, or if you, have some people who retire and then new people come in, sometimes things can throw the same case back up in the, just kind of like they overturned Roe v. Wade. Well, in theory, this could be overturned as well. And, ooh, there's a little baby deer outside. So in theory, that can be overturned as well. But for right now, and of course, Biden has gotten on TV and said, well, that's ridiculous. The president's not above the law. Presidents are not kings. But essentially, that law sets it up that if a president came in and wanted to be a dictator, they totally could do it. Okay? Now, is that going to happen? No, but the door's open, okay? And that was what the dissent said. They said, there's nothing constitutional about that decision. It just completely rips apart separation of power. Well, they're claiming it's in the name of separation of powers, but checks and balances are gone. Like, the executive branch, because this is the thing, it's not just that his core acts are immune. That's kind of been a thing. Like, if a president's doing what he feels is his job, then they're not going to be prosecuted for it. Okay, that's kind of been a thing. But then there's other things that are like official-ish acts, like, well, if he did this and he said, well, I was just doing this, in my duty as president to try to preserve, or try to protect people, or try to do this or that. It's the onus is on prosecution to try to say, no, that's not true. Thirdly, if there is a case where the president is prosecuted for unofficial acts, anything that he did officially is not admissible as evidence. So it can take so if it's something that a non-official act that that person engaged in while in office, they can't even bring that in as evidence. Okay, so it's a really bad decision for anybody. And I said, I don't care who wins. It may be a case of who abuses it and who doesn't. But that's not really, when you're talking about one of the most powerful military countries in the world, you don't want that kind of power in the hands of one person. okay? And that's just what's happened. So this is interesting. So what came into my mind this morning, because I always have to make a decision about what podcast I'm going to do for the following week on Ketonia. And who's been on my list for a while is Ma Durga. Now, those who follow know that I have done all of the tantric deities. Of course, I have some that I've taken down and I have to clean up and put back up. And I know people are bugging me about doing that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get to it. I understand people want it. I'm glad that people want that information, but I have a lot going on right now. So, in any case, Durga, I've done Kali, I've done, Chamunda, I've done some of the other deities that are very similar to her and around her, but I've not actually done, and I've done the 10 manifestations of Durga, but I've not done Durga herself, which is weird. But I'm like, okay, this is the week that I'm going to actually do Durga, because that's actually the myth. This is when I talk about mythology as being connected to, as either a guide sign or a guide post to what's going on in the human condition. There's an example of it. Because the story, there's something called the Durga Saptashati, the 700 verses in praise of Durga, and that's also part of what they call the Devi Mahatmayam, and also this particular set is in connection with rituals, especially, is called the Chandipat. Chandi meaning furious or angry, right? So, when Hindus celebrate Navaratri, in usually October-ish every year, like the date is, astrologically variable, I think, but it's roughly around like late September, October, usually is when Navaratri is, and that's the celebration of the tri-devis, the three devis, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati, the three devis. And that is when this particular, Navaratri is kind of these 10 manifestations of what we think of as Durga. So let me just give you very quickly what the story is there, without getting into a lot of detail. Basically, and this is very similar in a lot of Hindu myth, actually, where you have a story of what they call an Ashura. Now, we talk about Ashura as being demonic, but it doesn't quite mean the same thing. It just means a very materially based, like a being that is very much focused on material gain, maybe immortality, power, things like that. Focused more on what we're going to call worldly stuff, rather than on maybe what are the ideals of things that are about harmony and love and peace and the preservation of society and preservation of our abundance and our prosperity and being fair to everybody. It's kind of they're almost like the difference of values. So the devas, or the gods, tend to represent, again, not always exclusively, but they tend to represent those things that have to do with, bringing love, abundance, prosperity, goodwill, all loyalty, all that stuff in. Whereas the Ashuras tend to be more self-focused. So Ashuras in mythology will undergo what they call spiritual practices or austerities, which and they will do that for the purpose of getting a boon from Brahman, the creator god, or sometimes from Shiva, is usually what we see. And when they get that boon, the boon they usually end up asking for is something like, I want it so that nobody can kill me, or they can only kill me if it's like I'm standing on one foot at sunset, and this way. Like there's always some weird condition, and then Vishnu takes on some weird avatar form to meet those conditions and kill this particular being when it becomes too powerful, right? But in the Durga Saptashati, it's the idea that they talk about the Mahisasura. Okay, then a Mahi, of course, implies great, right? Yes, 100% there. The Mahisasura means the great ego, the great Ashura. And in that particular epic, the Mahisasura takes over the three worlds. So the gods are forgotten. And so there's no, it's literally just about the ego of this one being, okay? And all of his emissaries, and they're all, of course, as disgusting and narcissistic as you might think that they would be, because it's just this kind of exaggerated kind of, and he's all about acquiring wealth and all about acquiring stuff for himself. So the gods go and appeal to the Devi, okay, who is the supreme primal, the Adi Parashakti, the primal power of the universe. And they petition her, Ya Devi Sarvabhutesu, Dayarupina Samstata, Namastaste, 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 Namo Namaha. And they go on, and there's a whole long litany. And she appears to them, and it's kind of like, or they say that she kind of like splits herself in two so that she can, like have a conversation with herself. It's really interesting. But basically she says, what's going on? And they say, okay, well, this Mahisashura has taken over the three worlds. And so it's like everything is dead. Remember I talked about Azrael, talking about everything's dead. People are dead, everything's dead. It's like, okay, so they need the Devi, the vital Shakti force to come back and to restore balance. And so what she does is she appears as Durga, and she sits on her tiger or lion, depending on how you read that. And the Mahisashura sees her, and of course she's very beautiful, so he sends an emissary and says, oh, you should come marry him because he's so awesome, and you're just a woman and you're nothing, and it's kind of this whole little thing that goes on. And Durga just sits there and says, oh, yes, of course, what you're saying is true, but I'm just a woman, and I wasn't thinking, but I made this promise that no man can have me, and they're saying, if he defeats me in battle, basically, unless he takes me by force. And they were like, what is wrong with you? You're crazy, you're never going to win against him, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, yeah, what can I do, but, I made that promise, so you can go back and tell him that. And of course, he's furious, so he sends out the armies of Chonda and Munda, passion and anger. And she recites a mantra, she recites Hum, and just obliterates the entire army. And whoever's left is basically her lion kind of eats whoever's left. Actually, I think there's another army that comes out before passion and anger, and then they come out, and then that's when Chamunda comes out of her third eye, who is that form of Kali that is, or we see her as a form of Kali, or at least one of the Matrikas, who comes out in this very emaciated form, but she starts devouring all of them. Okay, so now we're talking about the devouring mother, because it will literally say there, then the goddess got angry. That's the translation. And in short, there's this big battle that goes on, and it's the females that are all doing the fighting. It's all the Shaktis that are doing the fighting. And they're often discussed, I've seen places that talk about them, they're the spouses of the gods. No, they're not just the spouses. They are the consciousness, the primal energy of those gods. The feminine force is the thing. It is the thing, because that is your Shakti, that is your Kundalini, that is your core energy. It's not about, that's why I say when I say Tantra is not just about sex, and Goddess Kali is a baddie. Yes, she sits on my altar right over there. She is, but she's there to bring clarity. She's there to cut the head off of ego. That's what she does. When people get too far enmeshed in material stuff, when people get too far enmeshed in their own greed and their own power, it's like the head gets cut off. And then she's, with the others, with the 10 Mahavidyas as well, like a Chinnamasta, for instance, who cuts off her own head to feed people. It's kind of like, there's all of this kinds of very shocking tantric imagery that when Westerners look at it, they go, ooh, that's scary, or they think that's demonic. And it's like, no, it's not. It's just the opposite. It's there to go in and to fight things that that try to put on a nice face or put on a protective face, but they're actually not. And didn't we get the politics card with the person who was really the snake but was like holding up a mask at the center of the reading yesterday? So to me, this is about the way in which, so again, we're not talking about any kind of literal, battles of gods or anything like that. I'm not suggesting something like that. But they are talking about the idea of this furious feminine force. That's what came up. That's what I said. I said, okay, that's what it is. We are in a situation now where we're being compromised by people who are not interested in the good of people, but are interested in their own agenda. Okay? And again, it doesn't matter to me what the original politics are or whatever. It's just not a good thing for a country that has valued everybody's personal freedom. Okay? It's just a bad thing. And okay, if you don't live in the U.S., you might say, okay, well, that doesn't apply to me. Well, again, it's one of the most powerful military countries in the world, one of the big powers in NATO, and so and to have that country potentially run by somebody maybe who does things kind of the way Putin does them, that's just not good. Okay, it's not good for anybody. So, yeah. So I don't know. We still don't know what that's actually going to mean, but it's almost like, yeah, that's like, there's the dark feminine fury that kind of needs to come in there and say, no, we're going to restore this balance here. Like, we reached the tipping point. It's time to restore the balance. Now, how that's going to work, again, I'm not talking about wars, revolutions. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. But it seems to me that the fact that this keeps coming up, it keeps saying, like, pay attention, like that collective, remember I'm saying the collective needs to be the priority rather than just us thinking about, me and my individual thing and what I have to do. I mean, obviously our individual lives and our decisions are important, right? And our own security and everything else. But it's kind of like saying, okay, all of that might not mean a whole lot if we don't, if we don't, some kind of action has to be taken that's focused, that recognizes that there's a collective problem. And so I ended up pulling a couple of things. I pulled a couple of fairy cards, which was interesting because I just kind of said, well, what do I need to say about this? I mean, this is coming up. This is what came up for me this morning. And the first card I got was the honesty card. Okay, this is in the fairy oracle. And it's saying, yeah, you got to be kind of dead honest about what this is. And not just try to say, well, because a lot of people are trying to say, like I talked to my mother yesterday, and she was like, oh, but see, that's not how this country works. So they're not going to let anybody be a king. I said, Mom, it's like people are just kind of going, oh no, I'm sure it won't be interpreted that way. It just was. It just was. And people, I think, are kind of in going, oh no, that's not what's happening. I'm like, yeah, you need to pay attention to this, because your liberty might be at stake. I mean, it may not be. Maybe, again, we've also seen that they seem to be saying that neither Trump nor Biden's going to run. So, but of course, that still doesn't mean there might not be people with political agendas who are running. So, I don't know. But that piece of it, to me, I was just like, wow, that was like a bombshell. Because I said, that kind of refigures what the priorities are. I mean, really. And we also have this collection of pixies that came up. This is this card. And this is about, focusing on the collective, thinking about being honest and focusing on the group. And I think on the most fundamental level, if we get away from individual politics, and I'm not saying this because remember, Azrael also keeps saying over and over again, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. And I remember it was Jenny, I think, who was asking, she's like, well, why does he keep saying that? And I think this is why he's saying it. Don't be afraid. Like, okay, the course of action here is not to get scared, but recognize the value of freedom and the value of your ability to choose. And this is something where you want to, now you want that feminine to step in. You want that intuition. You want that caring about other people, and recognizing that, that's the thing that's important here. Okay. Not all this other, there's a lot of other things that we tend to prioritize, and it's kind of saying, okay, look at the bigger picture here. And that's been coming up a lot too. Look at the bigger picture. Look at the bigger picture. So I don't know. To me, I'm like, okay, this is at least, again, I feel like kind of like you're getting these puzzle pieces that are coming in. And I did pull another card this morning called Epona's Wild Daughter. And that card is literally about aha moments. It's literally about aha moments. And so to me, I'm like, okay, point being of putting it on this particular live stream is that this is what I think Azrael's talking about. And he's just kind of like, okay, but it's just kind of like, that's that Lilith energy, that rebellious feminine energy that says, no, we're not going to accept a situation where we're not free. I'm not going to accept a situation where I'm not, where one person's going to have power over me in this way. And again, it doesn't matter who it is. There needs to be sort of this and again, this is not just also about political activism, but it's about focusing on the decisions and focusing on how we're not only what we're gonna do for ourselves, but how do we as a species going to support each other? How is masculine and feminine going to get back in balance, right? How is everybody going to support each other? And again, it's a big question. I pulled some different cards today because I felt like I wanted to do something other than the Osho Zen today. And one I want to pull is this is the Yogic Path Oracle, probably because I'm talking about Ma Durga. But I'm interested to see what cards come up in this one. And then I'm just going to do a regular tarot pull. I have the Aquarian Tarot today in honor of the age of Aquarius. But yeah, it's just kind of an interesting situation that we're in. And, okay. The card we pulled is Ajna, which is for the Ajna chakra, which is this one. And let me see what this says, because I don't use this oracle a lot just because I tend to like oracles that I can, I can just read from, you know what I mean? Like I just know off the top of my head what they are. Now, of course, I know what the Ajna chakra is, but here's what the interpretation is. You've been using your sixth sense recently. Your intuitive powerhouse, the third eye, is guiding you in the right direction. Okay. Your third eye sees far beyond your two eyes and the limitations of your mind, which can only dream up what is known. Your intuition speaks to you in whispers, visions, feelings. Find the language of your third eye and continue to follow its hunches as you have been. The more you become aware of it, the easier the dialogue becomes. Your third eye is taking you to the very journey that your soul was put on this planet to fulfill. You came here to live, love, and learn. As long as you continue viewing the world from your third eye, you will surpass limitation and find yourself limitless. Trust your intuition and keep moving forward. The path will continue to illuminate as you take the steps. Interesting, right? Now, whether that's talking about what I'm saying, but I don't think again, these readings are not just for me. So I feel like this is something that's being said more broadly to people, right? That, follow your intuition. That's the feminine in you, really. I mean, that's the vision that you see, because when we just do things with the mind, not only are we not necessarily be able to see beyond limitations, but we're also, sometimes we rationalize things. We may try to rationalize our way out of situations and say, oh, well, because another thing that people do when there's a situation that sounds fearful is to go, oh, well, I don't know. I'm just I'm probably going to be fine, so I'm just not going to worry about it. Like, a lot of times we do that too. And I think it's not necessarily saying that people have to be worried, like, okay, everybody is now, something terrible is going to happen to everybody. It's not necessarily saying that, because I also got like the Lotus cards and stuff. It's kind of like, okay, don't overblow it here. But at the same time, recognize that this is something that needs to be addressed. And thinking about how we're all going to, how we need to address it and how people need to support each other. It's kind of like, okay, you really need to bring the feminine in. You need to have that clarity that doesn't come from all this thinking and all of this Adlerian, like, will to power kind of stuff, or Nietzschean. It's not about power. Okay, so here's the cards that I've flipped for today. Okay, interesting. So I'll just show you what they are. We've got strength. Okay, that's the first one. Again, don't be afraid, right? Courage. I pulled the Five of Pentacles. Now, Five of Pentacles has to do with the way in which we might feel like we're an outsider in a situation, right? Or we might feel that we're out in the cold. This is a card that can come up. Sometimes it can feel also when your security is threatened, whether it be financial security or otherwise, or where we feel like a situation where one might potentially feel alone. So if we look at it the way we do with our other reading, that might be the internal feeling, like, oh, am I alone in this situation, or am I on my own in this situation? But the external feeling of which we're aware here kind of is this Ace of Wands, Ace of Rods in this deck. And it's also reminding us that there's something new. Now, when we talk about having breadth of vision, it's like you want to look at the big picture. So the big picture, obviously not everything is just bad. But you have to make sure that you're seeing the bad as well as the good. And this is saying there's a lot of intensity and a lot of energy towards doing something new. Okay? So, and doing something new that is in a positive, in a productive way, in a way that is not harmful to people, okay? So yeah, we're looking at this Hierophant energy. Now, this is interesting because this is Taurian energy, but this is also about tradition, about people trying to do things, the same old way, or about trying to deal with traditional authority. But yeah, just flipping another couple of cards. Okay, so we got the Seven of Cups and the Two of Cups. Two of Cups, again, working with people. I kept getting the Lovers as well. So it's about making choices, and it's also about recognizing that, what's the common, what's good for everybody. What is the loving thing to do? What is the thing to do that works for everybody, rather than what is than what is just about, like, what might be about one's own survival or about preservation. Okay, this is about how do we work together? How do we work together to solve a problem like this? Okay, and the Seven of Cups is about, that's interesting because that can mean a number of things. It can often indicate a situation that is amorphous, unclear, but Seven of Cups also has to do with the removing of delusion. Okay, it has to do with the idea that we need to get out of a space where we need to wake up to see what is the situation. And I feel like, because, and again, I don't like to talk about political subjects on this live stream, simply because I'm not here to be political or to promote any kind of political point of view or agenda. But it does seem to me that we do need to be concerned about the agendas of some people who think that, and there are people who have come out right and said that, a dictatorship in the U.S. would be great. That's what we need. And there's people who actually, I'm not making that up. There's people who actually are saying that. And and even the people who perhaps maybe they're scared right now and think, I'm scared of the way things are, back to the whole, I want to go back to tradition. I want to go back to the way things were. It's just kind of like, do you understand the repercussions of what you're asking for? Because what will happen is then if that kind of scenario came to pass, they'd be like, I didn't know that this was going to change. I didn't know that that was going to change. It's like, pay attention to what's going on around you. There's definitely, that seems to be part of the energy here. And again, to me, this is not like, for some people, maybe it's a call to political activism. Certainly, I would say it's a call to voting for people, and voting and thinking about how you're going to make those decisions. But it's also, it really, something that's already been a bit precarious. It's kind of like it's toppled a little bit. And there's a lot of things, I think, I was talking about how people kind of take things for granted and say, well, I'll deal with that later. Oh, I'll wait till this is done and then I'll worry about it. And it's kind of like, this might be something you have to worry about now. So anyway, I don't necessarily want to, I think I don't want to necessarily create a lot of stress and so forth with this, but it's just, and I don't necessarily think that that's what Azrael is trying to say. I don't think he's just he's just pointing to the fact that, fundamental change needs to go on. Like if we need to move from the space where we move out of that Capricornian kind of energy, like Pluto's now moving into Aquarius, now we need to look more towards a future where we have breadth of vision, where we're thinking about things differently, where we're doing things differently. It's not just a speculative exercise, but we really do legitimately need to think about how we're going to do things differently. And what's the common good? Because I just feel like the common good is something that may not be, it's not. There's some people who are thinking of the common good, and there's some people who are not. And you want to make sure that it's not going to become, the system that we've belonged to. The one of the negatives of capitalism is it becomes kind of an every man for himself. Or every woman for herself. It's kind of like, I got to get what's mine, and the heck with you, and I got to step on you. And I think this is kind of saying, no, we need to, if we're looking at healing, if we're looking at opening the heart space, if we're looking at things like that, then it's a matter of, okay, now it's like that Kuan Yin energy. You want to have that compassion. And even Ma Durga, she may come across, she may be this vicious fighter, but she's doing it from the place of compassion. She's doing it from a place of, no, I want to get rid of the things that all these things you get tied up in, power and greed and all the stuff that can make us kind of dead inside, because we're not really living according to our soul. We're too concerned about how much stuff we're going to acquire and things like that. And again, not saying it's bad to have money and to have things, and we're not saying that that's the thing. But a lot of times we may give up a lot of our lives because that's the thing that we're attached to. So I feel like this is like saying, okay, this has got to make us. These are all things that need to make us reprioritize what's important here. Okay, So again, I'm not telling anybody how to think about that, but it does seem to be a thing where it's like, okay, we need to think about what if we think about that in the bigger picture, and again, not to catastrophize, but to say, okay. Certainly the legal people are trying to say, okay, what are the options here? What can be done? I don't know what Joe Biden's going to do. The implication I've gotten is that he may try to do something, because one of the things they said is this is the time for him to be reforming the court, because they're supposed to be completely impartial, and just the reality is that they're not. They have some kind of an agenda, and maybe it's beholden to political donors or something, but it's not. The highest court in the land can't. They're supposed to be outside of all that, and we don't have anything in place to keep them in check. So there may be some reform on that angle. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting time for the rest of 2024. Here we are at the beginning of July, 2 days away from Independence Day, kind of ironically. Although that's when the British elections are taking place too. I'm very interested to see how those are going to go as well. I think people are kind of saying it's going to be labor, but we'll see. I mean, I mean, I think for the sake of the people there, I hope so, because I don't think that. I don't think with the, whatever the Tories might have done for the country, I don't know that they're really doing anything that's all that helpful right now. So, anyway, enough about politics, but yeah, that's what came into my mind this morning. So, yeah, so I feel like, so that's what I've kind of used the Rouhani to. I'm like, okay, we need to transmute energy of saying, well, crap, into, okay, so what kind of action do we take? What's the thing to help us to move forward? And really, I can't lay out a plan for anybody, but I can just say, there it is, third eye. Like, listen to your intuition, listen to your inner voice, because it will guide you in what the right thing is for you to do individually. And that seems to be the thing. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, it's a, I feel like it's kind of an unusual topic, and sometimes I do feel weird about kind of discussing these things kind of in a public thing, but at the same time, I just think the message I keep to be getting is like, hey, take an honest look at things and then look through this eye, not just what your mind tries to do with it, and see what going forward. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad, like I said, it's a strange time that we live in, and ultimately, though, I mean, I will say this, if I can end this on a more positive note, it does seem like things are going to be okay. Like, some things, while this is shifting, other things will shift and things will be okay. But at the same time, it's saying, but just don't get complacent. Like, it still is a call for people to not be complacent about these kinds of things, and to do whatever they feel called to do in your own life to try to rectify that. So, anyway. Thank you so much for watching. We're about 10 minutes. Oh, you're welcome. And so, like I said, I hope all of you have a great day, a great rest of the week. Again, there's still a lot of good things, and we want to definitely focus on those and how those things can grow for us rather than allowing fear to rule the day. So take care, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.